You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Best Coast Comics. I'm one of your hosts, Christopher, a.k.a. the Bronze Age Nerd, and
Big B McFly, the comic guy,
is your other co-host, and together we are the West Coast Comics crew over here, holding it down, streaming for you late at night over here on Big B's channel, my channel, and over on the EXP. Links are for all those channels in the description. You know what to do. Go subscribe to those channels. Meanwhile, I just want to take a second. Let's say hello to all these heroes and all these villains that have joined us on this comic book stream. Let's check them all out. We have Preston coming in, wanted to stop by and say hi and leave a big thumbs up. We appreciate that. Thank you very much, Preston. And Richard says he's watching the Bills game, be in shortly. Last I saw, it was a pretty good game, so hopefully that's going pretty well. If Breece Hall could run off like a huge touchdown and then the Bills could still win, I'd be totally cool with that. My fantasy team would appreciate that. Renegade Rants Comics in the house. Hello. I definitely will say hello to more people as they join in the show. Maybe everybody's catching the end of the Monday Night Football, and we'll see everybody when they stream in here. We appreciate y'all being here
for sure. So
got a cool show tonight. At least the first half of it's gonna be cool. The second half might be kind of dicey as we're talking to some weird YouTube guy. But the first half should be pretty fun. We're talking about some comic book news. As always, what we're doing. As always, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about Heroes for Heroes first. Hey, Son of Crom is in the house. This is his Monday Night Football. That is awesome. So, folks, a lot of cool stuff happened for Heroes over the last week. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot to show off, but there's a lot of wheels in motion that have finally, like let's put it this way, there's a lot of items in transit. Yeah. So one thing I'll say, huge shout out to Mike from Lunch Money Comics. I know he got some stuff together and sent it over. Unfortunately, today was a national holiday. It arrived over the weekend at my P.O. box, and it's being held at the office, so I have to go sign for it to pick it up. So I couldn't get it because today was a national holiday. So I'll have to get that tomorrow. That's one thing I was hoping I could show off is what he sent over. But shout out to Mike from Lunch Money Comics for doing that. I have a package that came in from Mark Lineker, who's an awesome community member. He's usually in bed by now. He's over in New York. But yeah, absolutely awesome package from him with some cool books that we'll show off next week. And you'll be probably seeing him on the Heroes. It's at Heroes for Heroes Comics IG. Go follow that. And then biggest news, Mark Bagley's sketch is in transit, so hopefully that'll be here very soon, and we'll get to check that out. Mark Bagley did an original sketch for us. Got Chris Pacello to commit to doing a piece for us, and so he's going to have that being sent in pretty soon as well. So lots of cool news, lots of cool things coming in. Real fast, I just want to show everybody the Heroes for Heroes update. We haven't had a whole lot of movement on the donation front. I'm about to paste that link in the chat there for you all to go follow. But this is the Heroes for Heroes campaign. We are supporting Mission 22 to help veterans dealing with mental health, dealing with PTSD, their families that need therapy, everything they need to get the help they need to prevent unfortunate circumstances from happening, which it's hard to talk about on YouTube because you'll actually get demonetized, which is really a shame. But let's just say that I would go read up on the Mission 22 site and check out their mission. It's really worth checking out. We are currently at $525, which we've been at for a little while. But I think we're going to make some progress on that as we get going up to November 16th. That's the day of the big final auction with the original art and comics. And then keep an eye on the Big B's channel, my channel, and the at Heroes for Heroes Comics Instagram page for news updates about things that might be happening around that date too, that are kind of like satellite events we've talked about before. We have a couple of those in the planning phase right now. Pretty exciting stuff. Yeah. So Big B said before we talked about comic book news, he wanted, he got a couple small books or something like that. He wanted to show them off, I think.
Yeah, I got a book. Okay. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah, dude, that's all. Let me make you big so people can see that. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, this is the one you're talking about, right?
That's I mean, that's not the one I'm talking about, but that's a really cool book.
Yeah, this is first appearance of Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a book I've been hunting for a while.
About this one. Let's see. This one? Submariner #1?
Oh, no. That's a cool book, but that's not the one I'm talking about. That's a cool book, though. That's a cool book.
Was it this one? Golden Age Submariner #23?
Ooh. I mean, I just want to look at that for a second, but no, that's not the one though. I think it was a little bit bigger than that.
This one. Strange Tales 107. Human Torch and the Submariner.
No. It was a little bit bigger than that. It was a little bit bigger than that. I just had to pick my face up off the floor there for a second.
Daredevil #7, the first red costume.
Getting hot over here. I mean, look, that's awesome. That's not the one though. That's
not the one.
No,
this one. Everybody loves this one. Silver Surfer.
Oh my god.
4 in a 5.0.
That is one of my favorite covers of all time, man. That is such a gorgeous, gorgeous book. That is one of the books I was talking about, but it's not the one. I think I need a little more. I'm not feeling too good. I need a little more iron in my diet, I think.
Iron. Like Iron Man #1 and a 6.5.
I mean, no, that's really cool, but that's not the one. Didn't you pick up a big book this
one? This one? Tales of Suspense #39, the first appearance of Iron Man?
That's the one. Definitely the one.
Big shout out to Son of Prom. I hooked up with him this weekend and we did a huge trade. We met in a park. I will be having a video coming out later on. It looks like a comic convention going on in a park. It's insane. Big shout out to Travis from Comics Limited. He also did trading with Son of Prom. And Prom's going to be having a video coming out on his channel too. So keep an eye out on all 3 of our channels for content about this insane trade.
Holy crap, dude. That is
no, I'm like, I can't, like, all of these books are on my video of like books that I want to add to my collection for my, grails that are going to be part of the overall collection. And it's just like I was like one after another books going, I'm like, pow, pow, pow. It's just like, oh my gosh.
Dude, that is insanity. You were telling me this about this offline from the show, obviously. And I was just like, what? Like, whoa. What? I mean,
like, I went up to talk to somebody about some books this weekend, and you're like, what books? I'm like, this one. You're like, wow. I'm like, and this one. Wow. And this one. You're like, no. I'm like, and this one.
That is so cool, dude. I've told you this already, of course, but like, I'm just stoked for you. That is like, it is hard not to feel like vicariously so much joy for another collector who's been hunting like huge books to finally land those books. Like, it is just one of the best feelings because we all know like how good that has to feel. And it's just like what I'll say is Big B, we did the interview with Big B last week, which is kind of a little tongue in cheek because obviously Big B is always here on the show as my co-host, but we wanted to get to know each other a little bit better, let the audience get to know each other a little better since we're streaming on both channels and over on the EXP. So we wanted everybody to know that kind of stuff. And I know some other stuff about Big B too, where it's like, to me, like the comic karma of him having something like that happen to him means a lot to me, and I think it's really awesome that something like that can happen to somebody who's been through a lot of adversity, is what I'll say. And I mean, that's obviously your story to tell. I'm not going to tell it for you or anything like that, but it's just so cool, dude. You're such a good dude, and to see something like that happen for you makes me super happy for you, man. It's great. Well, it's beautiful, man. It's like very, very, very rarely do we get to have such good feelings about our friends in this community, and this is one of those times. So I'm happy for you, dude.
Right. We were having that conversation the other day, like about the greatest things that have happened to us in collecting, and I said one of the greatest things that's ever happened to me is meeting you and getting to be friends with you. So yeah, that's about the relationships and stuff in the community, and again, I can't say enough thanks to the Son of Crom for hooking me up with the trade, and for Travis drove me up there, carried everything up there in his vehicle, and it was amazing. So
yeah, no, that's so cool. Son of Crom in the chat, like I can't believe like how fantastic that is, man. That is just, I'm speechless. I do want to make sure you say hi to a few other people. You know, don't want to ignore some of these other amazing people in here. Try to find her first message, but Christina's in here. Hey, Christina, we appreciate you joining the show. Yeah, congratulations, Big B from Richard, 100%. Callie's in the house. Hey, what's up, Callie Comics? Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for being here. That is so cool. I just am blown away by that. That's one of those things that just,
thank you.
I think about it every day since you told me, and it's just so cool. So yeah, let's see. What do we got to talk about this week besides acquiring some of your? Actually, you know what? I'm asking you one question. This is a continuation from last week's topic here. So you told me about a video you made, which I actually still need to go check it out. But it's what, your top 85 comic books you're hoping to get someday, basically.
It's actually short. It just like kind of flashes the covers up, and it's like 80 books that I want to add to my collection at some point.
Okay, that probably is why I haven't seen it, because I don't like the shorts thing. It's always a little bit harder to like go find on somebody's feed than their normal videos, right? So, you know, you got that fantastic 4 #1 recently. You got the Tales, it's the first Iron Man. You got Iron Man #1. I know you were looking for that Silver Surfer 4 for quite a while too, right? That's a big one for you. So when you're knocking off some of those books that some of those have to be near the top of your list, I imagine, right? Like those are some of the bigger books.
I have to be realistic about what I'm going to be able to acquire, though. And so some of these things like the TOS 39 and the Fantastic Four #1, I didn't think were anywhere near me ever getting them anytime soon. And it was just kind of like, you know, they're on the list as like a pie in the sky. I'd love to have them. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, all the foundational characters of the Marvel Universe are on that list. You know, I want to get first Ant-Man. I want to get, all those guys. First Thor, first Avengers, X-Men #1, just like you. All the main foundation books for Marvel. So
okay. So when it comes to, and this is kind of one of those weird questions that somebody's comment in a completely unrelated spot kind of reminded me of, and I've been thinking about this a little bit. What does owning and collecting those books mean to you? Like those you said foundational, like kind of Marvel Silver Age books. Like what does it mean to you as a collector, like to get one of those? Is it like owning a piece of history? Is it just being connected to something you love so much? Is the nostalgia? Is it all the above? Like what is it about collecting those books that you personally really love? Because everybody has their different things that they like about collecting those kinds of books.
It's owning a piece of history. It's having more of a connection to that character and their beginnings, and having seen those books up on the wall since I was a little kid and never being able to afford them, and gosh, I wish I would have foregone buying new comics back in the day and just took all my money and bought those things as a little kid. But yeah, it's just having just respect and paying homage to those characters, So
yeah, okay. I'm always curious about that because it's something I've been thinking about recently, and again, it was kind of inspired by a comment I read. It's that sort of what makes you collect. Why do you actually want some of these big books? And I think for some people, they get caught up on wanting it so much they don't think about why they want it sometimes. And so I'm always curious to kind of hear that when people, especially like after you've already got it, right? Like after you've already got some of those books. I'm just curious about that. So thanks for sharing that.
I have a question for you in your interview that I'm going to be asking you, especially about some of that stuff too. But I know some of the connective tissue there about like what makes you tick and why you want certain books. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's in obviously a lot of things I asked you, I kind of already knew the answer, but I thought they were fun ways to get kind of people more familiar with you. And you told some great stories during last week's interview, so I appreciate that.
Crazy stories, chasing people in the snow.
Yeah, 100%. So we talked about amazing pickups and kind of an amazing trade slash. I mean, I almost kind of call it like an AOK too. I mean, I know it was a trade too, but obviously some big books. And then we talked about Heroes for Heroes. Let's talk about some comic book news, everybody. Let's talk about some news that's going on in the comic book sphere. That is super widescreen because I have my. Here, let me see if I can. Nope, still super
widescreen. That I have to shout out Richard. Also, he's been picking up books from me to help me fund picking up bigger books. So thank you, Richard.
Oh wow, that's cool. Okay, so I've got an ultra wide screen monitor instead of having like two monitors for like editing and stuff. It's not expensive. It's just happens to be wider, just like me. And if I don't resize the windows, they kind of look stretchy and weird.
You get that screen so you can see both of us on there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this, I don't want to talk about the details of this too much. We kind of talked about how Joker 2 was a little bit of a, I guess you could call it a bomb at this point. Especially, I saw a funny headline that was Beetlejuice beat out Joker 2 this weekend. So Michael Keaton once again defeated the Joker. I thought that was pretty hilarious. And I'm not trying to like hate on this or be negative in any way. I just thought that was funny. I don't want to talk about this too much because I know I haven't even seen the movie. So I know some people are super worried about spoilers, but I just think this is interesting as a headline alone. And this headline was everywhere. So I don't really.
I've seen the movie, obviously, but
yeah. Arthur Fleck, who is, if you haven't seen the first one or you don't remember, that is Joaquin Phoenix's character is Arthur Fleck. So Todd Phillips, who's the director of this film as well as the first one, claims that that basically Arthur Fleck was never the real Joker in these movies. And we can kind of surmise some things from that. Again, I'm not going to read from the article because I don't want to spoil anybody for anybody who is wanting to actually see the movie. I just want to talk about this in general because it dominated the headlines on all the comic book news sites and everything for like a day or two. And Joker 2 in general has kind of been on people's minds. What do you think when it comes to the success or the failure of some of these comic book movies? Do you think, is this a bad sign for comic book movies in general? Like, are we kind of entering the spot where comic book movies are kind of on life support in a way, or to a point where it's like we have to be like, studios are going to have to be way more choosy about the movies they make, because we've seen some major flops from TV shows and movies now. How do you think this is going to affect the comic book media that we see?
I think that they need to do a better job of making better movies. Can't just be all special effects and boom and pow and the nerds are going to be happy that their favorite character shows up on the screen anymore. It's got to be a good movie. That being said, I kind of probably get what they're saying about the Joker, where he was never the real Joker, because they wanted, at the very beginning of when they put the first one out, they said this is not in any way in continuity with any of the other Batman movies. Yeah. This is its own universe. So I kind of maybe see what they're saying there. But I think that we need to have like quality films. It just can't be all amazing special effects and somebody in a great costume. Now it's got to be a really good story. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, a lot of this, and I think this is what I told you too, is why do we need a Joker 2? And to me, the only reason that kind of comes to mind is Joker 1 made over $1 billion.
Right.
And like you said, like, it was never intended to really be connected to any of the other DC EU stuff or any of that kind of narrative. And so I don't know why it needed to happen. And then everyone really ripped on the whole musical aspect of this when it was first revealed that it was going to be a musical. That happened. I don't know if that was the exact same time that it was announced that Lady Gaga was playing Harley Quinn, or if it was just extremely close to it. But that seemed to be everyone's like big hang up with this, is I'm not going to go see a musical, which I don't know. It's just kind of funny after watching some musicals recently that people forget are musicals in some ways. It's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know if that's really the big problem with it, but maybe that's what audiences thought. But I kind of respected it for going there is kind of my point, because it's like, okay, well, the Joker one is lightning in a bottle. You shouldn't necessarily try to recreate that. So it's like, oh, hey, they're going a completely different direction with it, at least. And again, I haven't seen Joker 2. This it has nothing to do with the numbers. It has nothing to do with the trailer. It has nothing to do with the story. It has nothing to do with the reviews. This is squarely in the kind of film that I'm going to wait till I can watch it at home. And that has more to do with me than it has to do with anything about the movie. I did the same thing for Joker 1, and it was the biggest movie on the planet for a few months. And I just think that's kind of, I think it's interesting, but I also think that it's a sign that not everything needs a sequel. Not everything needs to be serialized. I think that might be the biggest problem with this.
They see that money, and it's really hard to resist. I mean, like we're saying, like it's its own universe, but yeah, obviously it did have a tie-in to Batman. It had the young Bruce Wayne when he went to the fence, there in the movie. So I mean, it does have its own kind of Bat universe. And, and we got some great comments there, cryptids and. But I guess we got to talk about that. That's upcoming, right? Anybody wants to
we definitely will talk about that. I'll kind of segue into that when I get out of the story. Kamikaze had a point about this story. This is so far removed. I don't consider it a comic book movie in his humble opinion. And you know what? You're right. And I think to that point, they probably did a poor job marketing it to people that were fans of the first Joker film, and like the general audience fans, I mean, as opposed to the diehard Batman / Joker fans that wanted to go see it. And I feel like, you kind of, they wanted to have their cake and eat it too a little bit, where they wanted to be a little bit of a comic book movie and a little bit of a Joker 1 sequel. And they probably needed to like lean one way or the other. And probably towards being a Joker 1 sequel and market it strictly as that. I know that sounds weird. If you watch some of the trailers, it sort of seems like it is marketed as a Joker 1 movie again, but it was a lot of emphasis on Harley Quinn and a lot, and they don't, but yet, even though they show a lot of Harley Quinn in the trailer, they don't actually tell us anything about her. So that's kind of a hard sell too. It's just like, it's Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, and I think that's awesome potentially, depending on what they do with it, but I need like a hook there if I'm the general audience. Right. I was always in it for.
I respect that for it being its own separate universe where it's going to have a totally different. It's not Margot Robbie. It's Lady Gaga. So
yeah, and that's I thought that was an interesting follow up, because obviously it's not like we're handing the reins over to Lady Gaga, because this is kind of a self-contained universe, unless something weird happens and they decide like, you are so popular, we're going to bring you into the main DC stuff, which I guess could happen. There's some rumors that
would be more leaning to that they probably would try to get Margot Robbie to continue being Harley.
I would agree with that too. Or I think maybe, everybody's favorite fan casting for any female hero or villain ever, Sydney Sweeney might be. I love that trend. It was like, there's a female hero out there. How could we spin it so Sydney Sweeney can play her? So I don't know. Having not seen it, I feel like I don't have a lot to say about it, other than it's just one of those things where I think it is unfortunate that there's kind of a string of financial failures in the comic book space in cinema. In a way, I'm happy about it, because I kind of want to see a more return to quality, a return to putting time and effort into the film, into the script, into the special effects, into the story, into the world building, which, by the way, in my opinion, was always DC's biggest problem when it came to their live action stuff, is they weren't doing a very good job world building. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on it. That said, we did get a couple of good comments in here. One of them, Comic Tropes, is in the chat. Hello. Fresh off his show, The Weekly Spinner Rack, over on his channel, Pros and Cons. Welcome to the show, Chris. And the Pacific Northwest, so into cryptids. It's funny. We've told the story a few times, but Frank Cho came here, and he's not from the Pacific Northwest, and he was obsessed with Bigfoot. He wanted to talk about it. So, yeah, and UFOs and other stuff too. But yeah, it is interesting. Every cryptid seems to be like kind of almost like location based in some ways. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but off the top of my head, the Jersey Devil, Chupacabra, like all those, Loch Ness Monster, all those kinds of things, right? I think Bigfoot's like probably one of the most famous ones, so I guess that might be why. I don't know. It's a good question. But here's what I was going to talk about real fast before we do our first break is Dr. Plagueis says, evening, which by the way, hello, got his room booked for this weekend. So hopefully I'm allowed to say this, because if not, sorry, Plagueis. But we're going to hopefully be able to meet up at the Frankenstein Comic Swap, which is coming up this Saturday in Portland, Oregon. Takes place in one of the malls. It's the Lloyd Center Mall, if you happen to be familiar with the area. So I think you're going to go too, right, Big B?
I'm planning on it.
I'm planning on it. Health willing, I guess is what I'll say, because my wife is currently sick. So if I come down with something, I'll either mask up or won't be able to go, depending on how much that ravages our family. But I'm trying to go because I love that show. The last time I went, I cannot wait to go back. So I'm hoping that's this weekend. I'm
hoping to do more digging this time. I get so caught up in interviewing folks and talking to my friends, and I don't do a lot of digging, so I need to do more digging.
Yeah, 100%.
Speaking of health willing, the last week, so I was trying to prepare to meet up with Son of Prom, and on Thursday my work kept me out super late, so I wasn't able to get my stuff ready. And Friday, I'm like, all right, Friday night, I'm just gonna get it. They kept me out till almost 9 o'clock on Friday night. And I'm just trying, digging like a madman, trying to get everything ready for him. And I think I got done at 1 in the morning and was passing out. And so we did the whole thing. And on Sunday, I died. I was like, I felt like, I felt like I was coming down with something. I think I was just exhausted, but.
Yeah, no, 100%. Your work and being kept late is always at the worst times too, it seems like, right? Like it's always like right before a show, right before a con, right before a whatever. A real Bigfoot. I mean, well, first of all, it's right here, just saying. But second of all, no, there actually are some Bigfoot encounter stories that I'm associated with, and it's pretty scary stuff usually. So we do need to take our first commercial break. That's right. The show has commercial breaks. Part of the reason why is because we're streaming over on the EXP network right now, which you can find over on YouTube. Is a great place to find it. The link is in the description below. And they have some wonderful advertising that they would like to show us and talk about some of their programs. So we'll be back in 2 minutes to talk about other comic book news.
Live from New York. What? Oh, sorry. Live from Cleveland? It's Friday night? It's Friday Night Live! With Nancy McCann. And Ricky. And sometimes Carlos. And featuring boxes and boxes of rare comics. Unique collectibles. Lots of smiles and conversations with new friends. Friday Night Live with Comics Unlimited. Friday night from 9 to 11 on The Experience.
Symphonic verses, Nocturne's romance. A song of romanticized darkness, dreaming death by sleep.
It's not just what happens when you have too many energy drinks anymore. Check out our content over there, too.
Hey, welcome back. It's Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd, and
Baby McFly, the comic guy.
And we are here discussing all kinds of fun things like the news of the week for comic books. We were just talking about Joker 2. And one of the other kind of movie-related nerd type things that happened this week is we had Henry Cavill cast to play a starring role in Voltron, coming up Amazon's MGM totally messed up saying that project is what I mean to say. It's a live action feature from Voltron. I read this part of the headline and I wanted to call it exclusive, but it's an exclusive article, not an exclusive series. But it is a Netflix or a Amazon show. So Henry Cavill coming to Voltron. I messed that up in the worst way possible, but moving it's, you know, seeing Henry Cavill, man, he just makes me all tongue tied. What can I say? So there's not a whole lot to go off of here because we don't know a lot of the rest of the cast, basically, except for one actor, Daniel Quinn Toey. I'm not familiar with that actor, but that's the other one that's mentioned in the article here. Apparently, they starred in I just was looking at the West End. So yeah. Anyways, looks like it's going to be a big budget show with Henry Cavill, taking the reins, and everyone's excited about his cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine as the Cavalrine. So that's pretty exciting. I'm a huge Voltron fan, so this is exciting to me. Were you a Voltron guy, Big B?
Oh, they love Voltron. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like right that came about right after Robotech. It was like started seeing Voltron stuff. It was like, as a kid, I was like, oh, what's this? This is cool. Robot lions.
I was one of those kids that had no idea that like any of the backstory of Voltron whatsoever. It was just a cartoon that came on where I was like, that's cool. It's really different. I had no idea that it was like a, dubbed, imported kind of show. And by the way, Secret Galaxy has an amazing retrospective on the history of Voltron. It's a fantastic channel. If you're not subscribed to Secret Galaxy, I highly recommend it. But his Dan Larson's the host, but it's kind of a team of writers and everything too. Go check out their video about it. It's really a fantastic deep dive into the history of how Voltron came to the United States and its different forms and different adaptations that were kind of purchased and brought over here. It's one of those things where it's it almost never happened. So it's really cool. But yeah,
I watched a really great documentary on Robotech too. And it's just insane how they mashed up different things that were not really even ever intended to go together.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in here, by the way, that I'm gonna kind of star those comments, which means we'll save them for later because they're good questions. Comic Trip said there's a Voltron comic made in Vietnam called Hero Hessman, where Voltron is sentient. Interesting. So does he also still get formed by mini lions, but he's sentient as well, or is he just a sentient mecha type creature like a kaiju?
Force in the machine, or is it Ghost in the Machine?
Yeah, interesting.
The humans as they're inside the lions.
Oh, okay. Renegade actually asked, do the people still control the lions? And he said initially, yes, but then it just becomes a hero that protects the world. Interesting. I will say I was kind of skeptical about a Voltron movie in a weird way, and I still kind of am, just because it could be done very wrong. But I will say Legendary Defender, which was, I think, the most recent series, it was a Netflix series, was a fantastic reimagining of Voltron lore, and it had kind of a comedy in the right spots, good action, and kind of a big budget animation project in good spots too. But that's one of those things where it's like you're watching it and it's so good because you think, oh, this is what Voltron was like when I was a kid, and then you go back and watch some original Voltron, you're like, nope. It was nothing like that. He starts as a pilot of lions, becomes a sentient robot. Oh, there's no way to see it anymore because Netflix. I wonder if that was a rights issue thing because Amazon owns it now, maybe, or something. Interesting. That's too bad because it was a Netflix original. That stinks. That's
you get that, where your computer's telling them you're somewhere else in the world. Maybe you can watch it somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, maybe, but if they pulled it for like contract reasons maybe it's with Amazon. I'm totally speculating. Then I could see there being like no way to watch it. That's the other thing too is I don't know if it ever got a physical release. Which shows I really, really, really enjoy. I always try to get a physical release. At some point, just because you never know. Especially in the streaming era. I love Cavill, but I hope it's about Voltron, not the humans. Oh, interesting. Okay. I almost thought Voltron worked best when it was about the humans overcoming their obstacles to work together, because and Legendary Defender, this is one of the things I love about it, is they did a good job of talking about how Voltron didn't work as well when they weren't working well together, right? And I thought that was really I thought Vehicle Voltron was super fascinating. And there's actually they've done tons and tons of re-releases and new versions. There's some pretty cool one I have coming from Gamma Base Comics, put it up for pre-order. It was on their Diamond account or whatever. It's like $100 one or something like that, and I got a little bit of a discount on it. But I have it coming from them, and I'm super excited to get it whenever it finally releases.
I'm really glad I got number 2 and number 3 in that late night whatnot show thing that you and I were in.
Oh yeah,
2 o'clock in the morning. I got number 2 and number 3 for like $1 a piece or something.
That's crazy. Do you have a number 1?
I already had a number 1, so I didn't have a
cool.
2, but I finished the set.
Nice. Yeah, I've got a number 1 I picked up at I Like Comics, but never had any of the other ones. I admit the Rick and Morty episode where they got a Voltron and kept going to parallel worlds to merge into bigger Voltrons amused me. That was pretty funny, because before that season came out, they said there was a Voltron episode, and I was like, that's going to be weird. And yeah, it was weird in the best possible way.
Well, actually, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk about there's a slew of announcements from Dynamite that came up. Luckily, the embargoes are up on them, so we can talk about them. Let's talk about some of these real fast. For some of these are continuing with Dynamite doing work with Disney. This one is kind of exciting. We got a Zootopia comic series. Jeff Parker is doing a new series with Alessandro Rinaldi. Look, Zootopia, as a father of a small child, it's one of the more entertaining ones of these movies for sure. And I think this is a cool franchise. I'm always in favor of seeing more comic books that kids can get into too, that the kids might actually want to read. I think that's super important. And this is only for kids, a free stick of Dynamite with every comic in November. That's right. No, but I just interviewed Brandon Montclair, who I believe Chris just interviewed as well, actually. But he's doing the DuckTales series for Dynamite coming out next month. And you know what? I'm happy to see this, especially with, there's some rumors about IDW and them not doing as great. But I think it's important to still keep seeing kids comics out there. So this is a new series coming out in 2025. Very, very fun.
That's awesome.
This next announcement from Dynamite, kind of speaks to something we talked about on the show.
We did.
Yeah, we had Nick Barucci on. It sounds like Chris did have Brandon on. So yeah, definitely go check out his interview with Brandon. Brandon's a really cool guy. Brandon, I don't want to blow up his spot, but there's something he's going to try to submit to us for Heroes. So I'm working with him behind the scenes. So he's a cool dude. I really liked him after getting a chance to talk to him and spend some time with him backstage after the interview and talk to him in a little bit, more open setting. And that was my first chance talking to him. He's a cool guy. But yeah, Nick Barucci kind of alluded to this when we interviewed him. He alluded to Silverhawks coming. And sure enough, Silverhawks assemble for a new spacefaring adventure in comics in 2025. So acclaimed writer Ed Brisson from Batman Incorporated and Predator takes on the franchise, following his work on Apex. Got George Cambadias, who was a key player in Gargoyles, it looks like. So that's pretty exciting stuff. There is some
cover of Jay Lee. The middle one looks so Jay Lee.
That's got to be Jay Lee. I know he's doing a cover for them for sure. He's been doing covers for all their big books, I feel like. Heavy hitters, Lucio Perillo, Jay Lee, James Stokoway, Declan Shelby, Geraldo Borges, and the latest breakout artist, Mannix.
Very cool. I love that one there on the left. That's sweet.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm trying to figure out what's up with the one in the middle there. That's interesting.
It's like a Simpsons-esque one.
I know. Yeah, I don't think I fully understand that. I know so little about Silverhawks. It's one of those 80s franchises that I have a copy of Silverhawks #1. That's about as close as I get. I never really watched the cartoon or whatever. I know what it looks like, and I've seen stills of it, but I just never got into it. That's the Mannix one. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Mannix, I've been seeing his name, or their name, I should say, cropping up more and more. I think it's a he. But anyways, definitely interesting for sure. Yeah, that's kind of why I was like, okay, I think I've seen a style like that before. It's that animation inspired style is pretty cool. So I'm excited for that. Were you a Thunderhawks guy or Silverhawks guy?
Silvercats and Thunderhawks. We're making new comic books.
I mean, it's easy. That's all you got to do.
There you go, Dynamite. Crossover. Silvercats. Yes, I like Silverhawks. It was pretty cool. There wasn't a lot of it. That was the thing.
That's one of those things. It felt a little short-lived. There's some other stuff too. They're doing a couple of winter specials. This Powerpuff Girls, another franchise that I'm interested in because of my kiddo mostly. Although my wife was a fan of Powerpuff Girls as well.
Yeah, it was a good show. Great show.
Yeah. Yes. Along with that, get a little Coppertone homage here with the Vampirella Hell Day special. Very cool cover. And there's actually some really great ones too. So you got the Heliday 2024 special. I'm a sucker for like holiday specials from comics, like Christmas set stories or winter set stories. There's always kind of an interesting magic there, and especially when you take some characters out of their normal settings that have nothing to do with that kind of stuff and put them in those kinds of settings, it can be fun. There's some other stuff too that came. Oh, what was that?
Is that Jay Lee again?
That looks like Jay Lee to me.
Cover A, Jay Lee.
Yep. And then there's a Linsner cover there, Panosian, and a cosplay, it looks like. Yep, that does look like Jay Lee, especially the little elf there.
I think the first movie that I saw that had like horror and Christmas together was like Gremlins. I remember seeing that. I was like, whoa. Yeah,
and that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I love that stuff. I love all the Shane Black movies that are set at Christmas time, and just I love all that stuff.
Or Silent Night, Deadly Night. I remember that one. We went through every horror movie in the VHS sections at Blockbuster.
Die Hard, all those kinds of movies that are Christmas movies, right? Start that debate early.
Quote, they said somebody said Alien is Die Hard from the aliens' point of view in space.
I mean, no, but that's funny. Yeah, just about every Shane Black movie. I think The Predator did not take place at Christmas, if I'm not mistaken. I think it took place during Halloween. Also, probably the worst Shane Black movie, which is too bad because I enjoy most Shane Black things.
Well, that's the worst. I mean.
Have you seen The Predator?
I've seen it, but I'm saying like there are a lot worse movies out there. You beg to differ. Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm such a huge fan of the franchise. I mean, like, if you went back in time and talked to me before that movie came out, before the trailer came out, even, and you said, "Hey, remember that guy who was awesome in Predator 1 as one of the Predator 1 team members?" And went on to have a super successful career making some of your favorite movies like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Well, he's going to do a Predator movie. I would have like shot through the ceiling with excitement. It would have been awesome, but man, it was so bad. I think it was just because my expectations were so high. That's the problem. Anyways, Shane Black, neither here nor there. Friend of the channel, Trish Forstner. Absolutely adore Trish, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Tony. He was an awesome dude when I met him. Would love to have them on together at some point to talk about some of their projects. But they are doing, and Trish actually told me about this before it happened, a long time ago. Actually, she was kind of doing some prototyping for some of these plushies. So I'm super excited to see some of the stray dogs coming as plush characters. That is really cool, and I just wanted to kind of share that because it's just fun to me that's going to happen. I know she's super excited about that, and a lot of other people are too.
That's cool.
So very cool, very cool. Let's see. I think I got time.
Toys.
Yeah. I got time for like one more story here, probably. Before we get into the interview. Oh, actually, I can do these kind of back to back because these are somewhat related. These have to do with art sales. So the first one, I apologize that this is a little blurry. If I do that, it might be a little bit better. It wasn't the highest resolution image. This was shared to me. I think this is a Heritage.
Yeah, it looks like Heritage.
Yeah, Heritage. So this is Adam Hughes art for Vampirella #1. Speaking of Vampirella, we just talked about her. Including the buyer's premium, sold for $125,000 the other day. For the cover art. That's cool. That's just cool. I mean, I'm a big Adam Hughes fan. I've always been a fan of his. Sorry, Chris's questions. I'm starting a few of these because we'll get to them. But they're just cracking me up, man. I love that he kind of comes on here and he does this amazing show on Mondays. He comes over here and chills, and I really appreciate that. I think that's awesome. But then he also asks like some really cool questions, and I also really appreciate that. But that does segue right into me talking about this story, which is the Absolute Batman #1 cover, which, Absolute Batman #1 is a huge success right now. Big book, selling out at the distributor level, selling out at comic book stores. The A cover art sold for $70,000, which is pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive for a brand new piece of artwork.
I will say this is Nick Dragata's art. Nick Dragata actually had original art for sale last year on Heroes for Heroes. In fact, Brian LCS ended up picking up that piece. So just saying, if you're always looking for some kind of up and coming stuff, 24/7 Comics was nice enough to send that over, a Nick Dragata piece that Brian LCS ended up picking up. And now, the Absolute Batman #1, Nick Dragata art selling for $70K. That's pretty awesome.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. By the way, have you had a chance to? You don't read a lot of new releases these days, but have you read Absolute Batman by chance?
Believe it or not, I have a copy. I just got it on Saturday. Travis was kind enough to give me a copy. So
nice. What'd you think?
I haven't got a chance to read it.
You haven't read it, but you do have a copy. Okay, I get it.
I haven't got a chance to read it.
Okay. I won't spoil it for you, but it's a pretty fun read. I think it's going to have some legs on it. It's certainly going to have some Bat logo on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I agree, Richard. It's an ugly Bat logo, but at least if you read the comic book, it does have, and this was out before the comic even came out. I don't know if everybody knows, it does have a purpose at least. So there is that. But yeah, it is fun, man. I really want to find my meme I made now.
Yeah, your meme was great.
I'm gonna try to pull it up. It might take me a second here, but I wanna pull it up just because I'm shameless when it comes to the memery. So rarely do I get a chance to talk about it.
So logo, kind of the same theme behind why the Punisher wears a big white target on the front of him. That's where everybody aims for, the big white target.
You would think. And I mean, there's probably some of that, but no, there's actually, I don't want to spoil it, but there actually is even more to it than that.
Okay.
Here we go. Found it. The anticipation's killing everyone I know.
It was good.
And got to share the new screen. I wish there was a more elegant way to do this. Sorry, everybody. Yeah. So I don't know. I took more time on this than I care to admit. You know, I mean, I'm not going to take hours on it, but I took like 10 minutes making it, which is probably a lot to do for a meme, but so I'm just proud of it.
It's good. It was very nice. Very nice.
I tried to at Scott Snyder hoping he'd see it, but I don't think he did, unfortunately. But it got some pretty good traction. So there you go.
There you go.
Thank you. Shameless memery. So we're going to take our second ad break, and then when we come back, we're going to do our main feature here. I think I burned through all the fun stories from this week that I had queued to talk about. Actually, what we will do is we're going to come back and we're going to tackle a couple of these hard-hitting questions from that Chris over there at Comic Tropes, and then we'll jump into the interview. I'll see you in 2 minutes, everybody.
Whoa. Did you miss it? Yeah, they can go by pretty fast. Let's slow down the footage.
Welcome. It's time to skim some comics. Miles Morales Spider-Man, I will just tell you that Miles is very important in his role as a vampire. So.
It's fine. If you like Hercules, read it. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. It's fine.
The art is still stunning. There's a panel, little spoiler, there's a panel in this where Chitauri first hits Lion-O, and he is the best "did she really just hit me" face I've ever seen put in a comic book.
Wow, live reviews of new comic books so you can be ready for New Comic Book Day. What is this? Oh, I see. It's Minute to Skim It. Part of the experience.
According to a statistic that I just made up, people spend 4 hours a day changing the television channel. People who watch The Experience don't do that. Save yourself a ton of time by tuning into The Experience and enjoying our new original programming 7 days a week. And then tell your friends. Think about the money they could save on batteries in the remote alone just by tuning into The Experience. Find out more by scanning the QR code below.
In a world where you hit like and subscribe on our YouTube channel.
That'd be really great. Thanks.
Hello. Welcome back to the show. I am Bronze Age Nerd, aka Christopher. I'll do it differently this time. And I am joined by
Bigby McFly, the comic guy.
Or is it Bigfoot 1 and Bigfoot 2? I don't know. You decide.
1 and 2.
There we go. I did want to tackle I did not love the Riddler saying absolutely 4 times. It was only funny 3 times. I did. By the way, I just want to say hi because I did not highlight Eddie Von B. Thank you very much. I know you're still waiting for that Voltron and Battle of the Planets crossover. I hope you get your wish someday. Yes, there is a reason for the ugly logo. I don't want to spoil it for Bigby. Hopefully, he's going to go read it tonight after the show. This is a great question from Comic Tropes. And I know we're going to do the interview with me here, but this is a good one for both of us, I think. Do either of you have a dream interview you'd want to have on your channel? I've got a couple answers for that. I'm trying to think if there's just like one perfect one. Do you have an answer for that, Big B?
I don't know. Like, they what's the phrase they say, never meet your heroes. It's like, I think like it might ruin things for me, but I'd love to talk to John Byrne and Chris Claremont one-on-one.
Yeah. And that's my main answer. Chris Claremont, I want to get in a fight with him about Cyclops, which is a very weird thing to say and kind of not be kidding really, but like also not like, I don't want to be aggressive about it. I just want to like argue with him about Cyclops. I also have a lot of legit questions I'd love to ask him. I actually think it is a legit question, but a lot of other questions. Larry Hama was on that list. I don't know if he's actually, I mean, I would absolutely love to. I just don't know if he's my dream anymore after getting a chance to talk to him a little bit and kind of seeing how he reacts to questions. And I think he's kind of over it. Let's put it that way.
I was just saying, like, it might ruin your love for that guy's work.
Yeah. Right? I don't think it really would in a way, but I don't think it would be as fun of an interview as I want it to be in my head. I'll put it that way. But he's still on the list. And then Jim Lee would be up there for an artist. Todd McFarlane would be up there for an artist. They've done a lot of interviews. I do think talking to Jim Shooter in a fuller length setting would be.
I was just gonna say Jim Shooter was awesome.
Yeah. For me, the answer is probably. I love your answer of Claremont and Byrne like together. That would be amazing. I don't think that would happen, but that would be amazing.
Let's get Claremont, Byrne, and Shooter together.
Yeah, I mean, he is asking for the dream. That would probably be one of them. That would be interesting. That would be very interesting. And then, in the same hard-hitting vein, is a corn dog basically the same thing as beef Wellington? I mean, I'm going to say my answer depends on, is it an all beef Frank?
Question.
Because if it is, I mean, kinda. So, yeah. If you're going to ask me if a hot dog is a sandwich next. Oh, you're going to NYCC. Awesome. I know a couple people in the chat are going to NYCC. That's fun. That's such a good time. I bet. I hope nobody poops on the floor this year. That's my big hope. I hope there's no Peach Momoko fights. Yeah. Well, and Chris has interviewed some greats for sure. I'm curious, Chris, do you have anybody left that's kind of your dream interview? Anybody that's still on that kind of Mount Rushmore for you? Anybody, I should say anybody still living. I know there's a lot of people that passed away. I'm sure you would have loved to interview, but anybody still around? Yeah, I bet. And I would have a good time with it. It was just, I kind of know what I would get out of it. You want to interview the creator of Wolverine, Richard? That's awesome. You could call it a shoot interview. Yeah. It is an all beef with just a little bit of, the little bit of pig anus makes it just a hot dog, just a corn dog. Maybe you can have Nick stop by again for 5 minutes. That turns into 45 minutes.
More than that, wasn't it? It was like an hour and a half.
I think it was like an hour and a half. Yeah, it was pretty impressive. Peach Liefeld, my favorite comic artist. A very realistic watercolor painted style with lots of pouches.
I think that's two people he would like to interview.
Oh, it's not the same person. I get it. Okay. Whew, I was confused. Creator of all things. Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? I need to tone it down a little bit and get on my game face because
hard hitting
Biggie's turn to take over. All right, it's the main event. It's what you've all been waiting for. What do you got for me, brother?
What is the meaning of life? No,
it's a great movie. Monty Python, fantastic film. I highly recommend it. I like Life of Brian more, and of course, Holy Grail.
Like my life. Okay. So, Bronze, tell me a little bit about your early history with comics and how you were drawn to them. And was there a point where you rotated away from comics and maybe came back?
Yeah, so I first got into comics the second time I was in prison. I was 10. I had just done my first triple homicide. Comics were an escape, man. No. So it's a great question. Yeah. So comics for me, comic strips got me into comics probably first. Things like Calvin and Hobbes, honestly, at a very young age, I loved Calvin and Hobbes. My grandparents had some of my dad and his brother's old Sad Sack, Dennis the Menace, Beetle Bailey, Donald Duck kind of comic books around, Gold Key stuff. Well loved. And I'd look through those. They were fun, but they didn't really like, oh, sorry, I didn't. Oh, you're highlighting that. Aha, okay, excellent. I thought I did that by mistake. I was like, oh no, did I leave an old comment highlighted? How dumb, how dumb am I being here? So no, I would read those. And then I was big into G.I. Joe, talking about Larry Hama a second ago. Still am huge into G.I. Joe. And my dad, I was watching the cartoon. I was playing with the toys. My dad started bringing home comic books for me. I think the first one probably just from a grocery store news rack. And then eventually he started bringing home lots of them. He was doing baseball cards pretty big at the time, and he was trying to collect complete sets. So he made a spreadsheet for my G.I. Joe run. He'd go around. He was a forester. So he drove all the way around Washington and Oregon for his work. And so he went through a lot of towns that had comic book shops. He would try to find issues to fill the run. And so I would be, anytime we went on a family trip, we'd go into the comic book stores. He took me to a tour, like this is back in the MapQuest days, or whatever. He took me to like Portland, and we hit like 2 or 3 comic book stores, I think for my birthday one year. And so, we were just mostly looking for G.I. Joe comics. Pretty fun stuff. So that's kind of how I first got into it. But it was just G.I. Joe. Like that's all. It was because it was G.I. Joe.
Right.
And I got into X-Men as kind of the many people my age or our age did. The Pizza Hut campaign was coming out. The animated series was coming out. And so I got into it kind of through that pathway. I was like, I'm curious about this thing. That looks fun. And I remember picking up, I knew Wolverine was a character in X-Men. So I remember picking up a Wolverine. I always forget the issue number. I think it's 72 through 75, I think. It's the Savage Land story where Rogue and Jubilee go with Wolverine to the Savage Land and fight Sauron. And there's kind of a whole plot line going on there where they think Magneto might be back. Anyways, I remember being like, whoa, the guy that writes the G.I. Joe comics wrote this comic too. That's crazy. And so I got into that pretty heavily. And then I started buying Uncanny X-Men comics when the cartoon finally came out at comic shops. It's the first time I went to a comic book store, and I bought like Uncanny X-Men 280 and any other issues I could find from Uncanny X-Men after that. Starting with X-Men 1 and going through all those. And it was kind of just off to the races from there. And I remember like moving out of my parents' house and having like 14 long boxes I had to take with me. I was just super into comics and schlepping those around forever. And yeah, that's kind of how I got it. Did I get all your question there, or just kind of how I got into comic books? Or was there
a point where you like rotated away and then came back? Or
yeah. A couple different points. So one of them is, I started focusing on my career. So I started out, I was going into college and eventually dropped out of college because I wanted, for a couple different reasons. I dropped out of college mostly because I was being promoted at the job I was at. So I worked for Regal Cinemas, and I was being promoted from floor staff to being like an usher and all that kind of stuff. When I worked there in high school, pretty much right after high school, I was being promoted to manager. And not only was I being promoted to manager, I was kind of being fast tracked in the management program, even beyond that. So I was like, well, if I'm going to go to school, it's probably for business management stuff at this point, because I love history and English, but I didn't really want to find a career in those things. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go for business management. But I was like, hey, I'm getting business experience over here, and I need to work to afford college anyway. I'll just focus on that, and I'll pick up college again. I was pretty clear I was going to end up moving somewhere to take over a theater. And so I was like, well, wherever I go, once I can do that, I'll settle down and start going to school again. I ended up going to Idaho and Eastern Washington and all over the place, opening theaters for Regal Cinemas and being a projectionist and a theater manager. And I did that for 6 years. So during that time, I was pretty out of comic books. I would still get like trades during that time, but I wasn't actually like actively reading new issues. And then I settled in the Tri-Cities, which is Eastern Washington for those that don't know. And I went from working for Regal Cinemas to working for GameStop. And my store manager was a huge comic book nerd. And shout out to Damon if he's watching. I know he's kind of connected with my stuff. And so I kind of got back into doing monthly or weekly pulls. I had a pull box at a comic book shop there, and kind of got back into it there. I started, the first comic book I picked up was Walking Dead 7. That was the first comic book I picked up when I went back to the comic book store.
Yeah,
and I was reading Walking Dead like monthly after that. So I had like 7 through like 120 or something consecutively at one point. And that's kind of when I got back into it. And then I quit again later and got back in. But mostly as a digital reader.
Gotcha. So do you have all of the Pizza Hut X-Men books?
I never did originally, but I have got them all since then. Yeah. I had
many people that we talked to that got into it because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I still love the Joe Madureira poster art that came out, before Joe Madureira was kind of Joe Madureira. There's like this Pizza Hut ad poster kind of thing that he did the artwork on, and that something about that artwork just kind of sucked me in. And when I got the Night of the Sentinels tape, which is the first episode, the VHS tape. Yes, VHS. It came with the Fleer card, and then I got the Beast and Magneto cover one, and I've kind of acquired all the other ones since then.
Okay, well, Comic Tropes is paying for your question to you. Any stories of crazy customers when you were working for the movie theater?
Yeah, a few. So my first day working for a movie theater, I was training. I kicked out 2 people smoking crack in a theater, in a sold-out theater. The first night, I something I wouldn't have done by myself ever again after that. But I was just like, they're like, oh, these people are smoking crack in the theater. People are complaining. You're the usher. Go do something about it. I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna go kick these people out, I guess.
Kick out these cracked out guys. All right, good.
Yeah, well, and like literally crack pipe on the ground. I have a flashlight pointing it at them, and they're like, that's not ours. I'm like,
who is it?
Yeah, right. So that was my first night. I sold 2 different Playboy Playmates giant pickles. So that's a story.
Story there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
all right.
That's an interesting one. What else? I mean, there probably is other crazy ones that. So many people smuggling in food and finding like pizza boxes and.
Hey, what's the weirdest thing you found in the theater after cleaning up that you can say on the air?
Yeah, Chinese takeout and pizza boxes, which is like, wow, how did you get this in here? Like, I think they probably had somebody open the exit door and hand it to them, kind of thing. Every quantity of alcohol you can imagine. There was one time where there was 4 or 5 40 ouncers underneath some people's chairs. Just like, wow, the commitment.
Walked out of there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some interesting stories. I'd have to think about it for a little bit longer, but and then working for GameStop, there was the kid who came in. He was underage and all, rated M games. You couldn't sell them to people under 17. There's a game called Just Cause, and it's actually a series of games called Just Cause. He would come in and be like, "Do you guys have Just Cause?" And he came in probably 100 times asking for that game, and every time I was like, "You mean Just Cause?" "Well, we do, but I can't sell it to you." And every time, Just Cause, and the kid definitely wasn't messing with me. Let's put it that way. He literally saw the words Just Cause and was like, that game is called Just Cause. So I don't know if that's kind of funny. Yeah, there's definitely some weird ones, but I'd have to think about it a little more. I think selling Playboy Playmates pickles is probably my claim to fame there.
Right. So do you have any memories of like specific books besides the Wolverine storyline? I know you had one just recently. You got signed at the show, right? That was a big one, formative one for you.
Yeah, X-Men Unlimited #1 was it still is. It's kind of hard to pinpoint 100% your favorite isolated story, but as a one-shot standalone story, I absolutely love everything about X-Men Unlimited #1, top to bottom. It's a story about Cyclops, Storm, and Professor Xavier. They're the Blackbird crashing over kind of outside the Savage Land area into actual Antarctica, and they are all kind of hampered by different things going on. So Professor Xavier's hover chair gets destroyed. Cyclops's visor gets torn away in the crash, and Aurora is trapped in some rubble. And there's also some EM interference going on, which turns out to be part of the story. So she can't really use her powers in the typical way that she normally is able to. So they all have to kind of complement each other's weaknesses and kind of work together to overcome it. It's just a really cool story. I recently went to Rose City Comic Con, and Chris Baccello was the artist on that book. It was his first work for Marvel, at least as far as he can remember. And I got to talk to him about that a little bit, which was really fun. He drew a Cyclops remark on the cover for me, which was really cool, really fun experience. But that's one that stands out.
That's like one of those things like Meet Your Heroes, and like it went the best way possible right there.
Yeah.
So we got a question from Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a comic book that you regret selling?
Well, and that's a great question. I will get to that, Richard. But before that, there is actually a couple other answers I do have for that question. So
okay.
There's other great, superhero or cape books, as I like to call them. There's great stories there that I love. But I actually getting into independent comics is still kind of some of my favorite memories. Like reading Walking Dead 7 and getting that, being like, what is going on with this? And I do not feel ashamed saying this. That was kind of at a time where you couldn't reliably go grab a trade. You couldn't, go honestly digitally find a copy of some of these comic books. So I had to find other ways to read Walking Dead 1 through 6 at that time. But I bought, every issue of the damn thing that I could after that. And I would have happily bought those first 6 issues if I ever found them. But reading Walking Dead was like a lightning bolt moment for me. And then
I had no idea.
Yeah, that was a big one, just because I've argued with people about this before, because there's some people that kind of hate on Walking Dead, or I think they don't like how popular it got, maybe. But the pacing of Walking Dead I find fascinating. Every arc is almost like a buildup where it's like, oh, hey, we're getting some positive momentum going. So-and-so found some food, and so-and-so set up this thing that's awesome for the perimeter, and we can see the walkers coming, and then all hell breaks loose. And it just kind of like,
screw it up this time.
Yeah. And it plays on your expectations, like subverting your expectations of like the positive momentum that like, oh, this group's going to finally overcome it, and they finally have these walls, or they finally have the prison, or they finally have whatever. And like, nope. Because it always comes back to that. It's not, yes, the dead kill people, and because it's zombies, even though they're not called zombies in that book. and they're dangerous, but it's really the people that are the more dangerous thing. And that goes right back to the original Romero Night of the Living Dead stuff. And I love that.
Yeah, zombies aren't the monsters in that book. People are the monsters.
Yeah, exactly. Sin City 300, a couple also huge stories for me. A lot of Frank Miller stuff, to be honest. His early work especially. So anyway, sorry that I wanted to fill out some.
No, that's awesome. Actually, I like getting more detail. I had no idea how important Walking Dead was to you as far as your journey as a comic person. So that's awesome. A comic fan.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, it probably mostly burned through me. Like, I wouldn't go out and say, like, oh, Walking Dead #1 is a book that I really have to have. It'd be awesome. But I went very hard. Like, I obsessed on Walking Dead a little too much, and then the show, and I kind of got burnt out on it a little bit, to be honest. But then Invincible came along, and I got, because I started reading Invincible after Walking Dead, and I got down that rabbit hole big time too.
Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Are you ready to move on to the next question that Richard had?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that.
So, no, don't be sorry. That was great. Okay. Is there a comic that you regret selling?
Yeah, there's a few. So in 2018, I sold most of my collection, except for a few short boxes. And I regret, this is the cheat answer is that I sold a lot of my original Larry Hama, did most of it, that Wolverine run, volume 2, whatever you want to call it, the ongoing Wolverine series. I sold a lot of that. I kept a lot of the issues that meant a lot to me, like those original ones I picked up, and issue 10. I didn't have issue 8, but I had issue 10, which is the first time Sabretooth appears in Wolverine. Right. Stuff like that I had. But I sold like a lot of the issues that I wish I'd kept. And then there's one that really kind of got to me in a way I didn't expect, and that was Heir to the Empire #1. I had a newsstand copy of that. It was I think in fairly high grade. I didn't really grade my comic books back then. I kept them kind of notoriously. I kept them in whatever condition I bought them in, I kept them in, but I didn't necessarily like critique the quality of the comic book when I bought it off the rack. And I bought that comic book off the rack. Love that series. That was my window into reading the Timothy Zahn Star Wars stuff. If you don't know, that's the first Thrawn in comic books. It's also the introduction of Mara Jade, who's a character I really love. I love Thrawn as well. I love that whole storyline. The Heir to the Empire stuff is great. Really regretted selling that. I do have a copy of it. It was fairly high grade, that I got as a replacement, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of not the same.
That's not the exact same issue. Right?
Yeah, that's probably my big answer. But there's a few others. Some of them it's just like, oh man, because it was worth so much money a few years later, and that's kind of a cheat answer. That's one that like had a sentimental value to me.
And that's one of those weird stories too that has like how close do you come to people without not ever encountering them? So when you sold your books, it was to a place that I was working, but I worked in the warehouse side of things, so I didn't.
Yeah.
He's like, I sold it to this place, and I was like,
and to be fair, knowing what I know now, I sold it for way too little money. But also at the time that I sold it, really not. It's just one of those things where it's like, I probably wouldn't have gotten a much bigger offer from a lot of other comic shops. But that's part of the regret that's tied in with it is that if I'd done it piecemeal or run by run or whatever, I probably would have gotten more from it. Hey, what's up, John? How's it going? Buenos noches. But yeah, it's one of those things where that's a fun little like dovetail to our story. But I say that because there's a video out there of me talking about selling my comic book collection. Don't want anybody to think that like that comic shop ripped me off. It's just in hindsight, I never would have sold it there. But it's the thing where I had to get rid of them. Most of it was worthless, even by today's standards. A lot of it that was left in there was totally worthless. It was just, complete runs of stuff that no one cares about from the 90s.
Yeah,
so
a new show that we need to do.
Bronze Theater. There's definitely some stories there.
So Eddie says The Walking Dead was amazing, but it ended way too abruptly. It was like, what? Yeah, I agree. And the show was okay, but not as good as the comic. I agree.
Yeah, It's kind of weird because the first season was the Frank Darabont season, and I really enjoyed it, but I also kind of like didn't. I'm a literalist when it comes to adaptations. Like I wanted it to be closer to the show. Like the end of the first season, they're doing like the CDC stuff, and it's like, what?
Right.
It's very weird.
Yeah,
that was my
stuff that didn't need filling in, I think, and then they drugged something out that did. Like the whole Shane thing. I'm like, Shane's supposed to be dead by now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it's just weird because in the very beginning, it's like, oh, this is a very literal.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, and I know shows, a lot of, they want to create their own identity. That's a whole like philosophical thing. But with the comic though, the comic, I will admit, I did kind of lose some steam in the comic book as well. And I think it's just because I read so much of it. And every time what I would do is I would actually collect them, and I was getting them monthly, and I would save them up and like almost binge read them. And I did it because I could that comic book, I could read an issue of that comic book in like 8 minutes, so it was, Yeah.
And Chris says in one issue, they actually called them zombies, and Kirkman got mad at him for not catching it.
So it's all Chris's fault. I mean, sure. Do you remember what issue it was by any chance, Chris? Because I'm curious about that. I know you're right. I'm trying to remember. I guess it's one of those things where you hear people say, "Oh, they're not zombies in the comics," so many times that you just like remember it that way,
Okay, so I'm going to hit you up with some of the stories or some of the questions you asked me about. I'm going to actually expand on that. So, favorite heroes, favorite characters, favorite villains, and then I'll go beyond that with some other questions.
Okay. Favorite hero. So, I mean, kind of just chronologically, G.I. Joe was the first kind of comic book love I had. I have a tendency to not like the most famous characters the most. G.I. Joe's the exception. Snake Eyes was extremely popular, and I love Snake Eyes.
How can you not?
Yeah. It's funny, though, because as big of a deal as Snake Eyes is, like in the comics, he's actually not that big of a deal in the cartoon, really. It's kind of weird if you go back and watch it.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny because I remember my daughter we were watching some G.I. Joe, and she was always like she likes Scarlet and she likes Snake Eyes when they're together, which that's a good combination. You see that a lot more in the comic. And I think I showed her some of the comics.
When you get old enough to read the comics, honey, you'll get what you want. Yeah.
I showed her some of it already, like not all of it, of course, but she's into that. We love flipping through. Like we read the first appearance of Rogue, and she was super fascinated by that and stuff because she loved Captain Marvel. So for Transformers, which Transformers has been on my mind. Just did a Transformers interview, and it's the 40th anniversary. Prowl was my favorite Transformer. Definitely not a popular choice for most people, and a very complicated character morally as time went on. And X-Men, a lot of people probably know Cyclops is my boy. He's my favorite character on the X-Men. I've always kind of said Cyclops, Rogue, and Wolverine are my 3 favorite X-Men, kind of in that order, so to speak. I love Wolverine. I love classic Wolverine a lot more than kind of modern Wolverine. I like Wolverine when he still was vulnerable and he still had some mystery to him and still had some weaknesses. And the best thing about comic books is he's still that back then, and I could still go read that and enjoy that.
It's like that Sauron issue, right? You were telling me about.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like, I always think he's best when he's part of the team and not the focus of the team, right? Or solo. Solo Wolverine is awesome, especially when Hama was writing him. But yeah, Cyclops is just always been my favorite X-Men. It's a very unusual choice, a very unpopular choice. I know, like you talked about this, characters like the Hulk. You always, thought those characters that had kind of their struggles were interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, that's what I liked about Cyclops is he had that constant, I could hurt the ones I love if these glasses get knocked off my head. He's powerful and has to control it, which to me was kind of an allegory, metaphor for just being careful not to hurt the ones you love. And I always thought that was a cool part of his character. I have always been sympathetic towards leader characters on teams. I tend to like the leaders, especially ones who are really good at their job and like if you go back and read like the Marvel trading cards, you always hear about, you know, there's almost like a built up narrative at Marvel, like who's the better tactician, Captain America or Cyclops? Cyclops had this cool stuff where his power could be used to like almost like trigonometry. He was like bouncing his blasts around. He did a lot more of that stuff in the Claremont era of Cyclops. And I loved the creative uses of his powers, that kind of thing. So many X-Men I love. Those are just my top three, but I actually love pretty much every main X-Men.
I say like Cyclops, like I thought he was most interesting thing about him was after Jean Grey died, because it's like, you know, Xavier's dream is still going on, right? But for Cyclops, the dream is dead, right? I mean, he's like, so it's just like it's that struggle that he has, and then in trying to go on and be the team leader, and but you know the woman who loves has died, and then you know that whole growth period for him as a character was really interesting. But
it's interesting in a lot of ways. It starts most people's problems with Cyclops, though, because you get into the kind of some of the questionable stuff with his relationship with Madeline, and then leaving Madeline especially is kind of where people have a problem. But I agree with you. I think that stuff is very interesting. You know, Richard's asking my favorite version or traits of Cyclops. So for costume, it's the Jim Lee 90s Cyclops that I love. I actually really enjoy going back and reading the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby X-Men stuff. I actually really enjoy that version of Cyclops as a character, because, you know, he's into Jean, but he doesn't want to like blow it. He doesn't want to screw it up. Like it's kind of like there's a little bit of like Peter Parker mixed in there in his DNA in that early stuff too. And you can kind of see that. And then, you know, there's clearly pressure from Professor X for all the students to be perfect, to be the best. It's really kind of weird going back and reading that like in 2024 at this point. And I love how that plays out. In Cyclops, there's a lot of thought bubbles where he's like, I can't screw this up. I have to do good for the professor, that kind of thing. And that's interesting for me because I felt that kind of pressure when I was in school. So I think that kind of related for me a lot. Modern Cyclops is a weird thing because there's been this thing where they've wanted to turn him into a anti-hero or like a fallen hero kind of, almost like a Magneto-like character where he's kind of almost like a Breaking Bad thing, I guess, where it's like, okay, he, you know, because of the Phoenix Force, he killed Professor X. But that's the thing. It's because he was just crazy with power from the Phoenix Force. Nobody blames any of the other Phoenix Five for what they did as the Phoenix Five, but for some reason, Cyclops, everyone loves to hate on him.
right.
So it's kind of one of those things where it's become tough to be a Cyclops fan in a lot of ways. Not for me personally, but for talking about it with other people. People bring, oh, what about this thing he did? What about the Utopia era? I mean, during the Utopia era, he was willing to do whatever it took to save mutants. But he created X-Force, and he kind of ordered the murder of a child with Young Apocalypse, and there's all kinds of stuff really that happened. It's fascinating from a morally complicated standpoint, and then even going back to the stuff with Madeline, I think all that stuff it makes for interesting drama.
Right. So
that's
you said something similar about Prowl. You said like that he's a morally complex character. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so Prowl, like especially in the comics, he ends up doing kind of a lot of kind of similar like Black Ops kind of stuff, like willing to do some wet work to take out some bad guys, a little bit not the Autobot way. And it's kind of interesting. It's one of those things where you have this character who's on the surface is very, he's a police car. He's supposed to like to serve and protect, right? Like it starts out, if you watch the cartoon, that's very much how it plays out. But when you read the comic books, it definitely becomes, especially the IDW era stuff, it becomes more like he's kind of willing to lead secret teams. He's kind of almost like the uncanny X-Force of the Transformers a little bit, and kind of does some sneaky stuff that's fun. I think it's just kind of cool.
Cool. And some Prom says, also love Cyclops. Never really read X-Men, but started when they were in the rerun phase up to issue 93. Was super glad they kept him as team leader after GSX1, and his new visor was dope.
Yeah, that's 100% true too. Like that is kind of one of those. It's kind of cool and it's kind of lame. Like thinking about it, it's cool that he was still the leader, but then again, the subtext is he got the other team like killed essentially.
Right.
So you're the only one that survived. Weird, it's kind of odd. But yeah,
behind.
But
I mean, that extrapolated on though in what's that? Deadly Genesis.
Yeah. And they've gone back to that and explained it, 10 ways to Sunday in some of the other stuff that's come out too. And it makes sense. The other thing about Cyclops, I just wanted to kind of mention this. This is an X-Men 97 shirt. And I'll just say the redemption of Cyclops in a way as a character to be taken seriously was really refreshing to see. And I was so excited about that as a Cyclops fan, because it's not just look, Cyclops can be a little corny, not, all that kind of stuff he does. That's fine. I don't care about that. That's part of who he is. He's not cool because of that stuff. He's cool because of what he's willing to do for his teammates and how he's willing to step up for them. And
his dedication, right?
What's that?
His dedication.
Yeah, his dedication. And that shows a little bit in that cartoon. And they did a good job kind of bringing it back to more centric of what Cyclops probably should be, based on, like, we're talking about like the Cyclops is a joke in the Fox movies for the most part.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
100%. The Havoc relationship with Cyclops is pretty fun too. Especially there's an issue of X Factor where they're like fighting and their powers don't hurt each other, and they're like they're falling from a plane, which is very meta because that's how Cyclops and Havoc's origin story starts as kids. They're falling from a plane, like fist fighting. Havoc's kind of a bad guy at that point, kind of mind controlled a little bit, and it's just a cool issue. Basically, it's kind of fun to say.
Have no effect on one another, but
yeah,
they can still blast the crap out of each other and nothing happens. So.
Yeah, there's like punching on the way. It's just like
yeah, I mean that works, right?
Yeah. He's the coolest deadbeat dad. Yeah, well, although he's deadbeat dad, but then again, he went and raised his kid in the future for a while with Jean as
that's true.
Slim and
Connie's son storyline.
Yeah. So, but you're not wrong either. Like, there's definitely a lot of that going on for sure. Like, it's a complicated, and that's actually part of what I'd love to talk to Chris Claremont about, because he has this issue with Cyclops and in some of those ways, but it's like he also kind of wrote a lot of that stuff too. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, what are you talking about?
Right. You set that up. So, and true, right?
I think he was just tired of the original cast and wanted new X-Men. That's the real answer, and that's fine too.
Yeah, I think he was kind of like, okay, I've played enough with this toy. Let's let somebody else put him in a different sandbox and play with him and bring in some new pieces to play with.
Totally. And it worked. It for sure worked. So
yeah. I mean, I love like where they took Beast and put him in the Avengers. I love Beast in the Avengers. I mean, so.
Yeah. Oh, and I love his solo stuff, which is really fun too.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of touched on favorite storylines, but is there any other favorite storylines that you want to highlight?
So besides the stuff I already talked about, I'm a big fan of the Alex Ross stuff, like Kingdom Come, Earth X, Universe X. I think that's pretty masterful storytelling. I'm a fan of dumb 90s stuff. That's what I grew up to. So like I unironically love Gen 13. I love Ghost.
There's some good stuff, There's some
Aphrodite 9. Yeah, I liked all that. Some of it for the artwork, some of it for the story, some for both. Some of it doesn't hold up the same way.
Those are some great artists right in there. You can use names like David Finch, Adam Hughes, and J. Scott Campbell.
Or Jim Lee too, depending on which era. Yeah. And beyond that, there's even, Adam Warren eventually took over Gen 13. He's a great artist. There's just layers of stuff there. I read, I didn't love the story, but I read Glory, which had a lot of Mike Deodato art in it. It was really great at the time. I loved a lot of that Image stuff. especially away from the main core titles. Like I actually didn't like. I loved early Spawn. I think it lost its way for a while. I didn't love like Young Blood, and I didn't love Stormwatch and some of the other stuff that was kind of the core Brigade. Some of that stuff I didn't like as much. But once you got outside that, I actually thought some of the dumb 90s stuff was pretty fun. Not the hard hitting stuff that we go back and read with a lot of fondness, but at the time, you know, think about what comic books were like in the 40s and 50s, and in the days where people were buying comic books as disposable fun entertainment. It's kind of like that, right? And it served a lot of that purpose. Obviously, you can say I probably love a lot of the X-Men storylines, so I'm kind of avoiding that for the most part. I love all the big ones there, Age of Apocalypse, and all the big stupid stories, and some of the really foundational ones. I liked Straczynski's run on Spider-Man. The Totem stuff was really fun.
Yeah. Ezekiel up with Madam Web now, but
yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of tarnished by the end of it, which, you know, kind of like Chris's comment about X-Men and Claremont. It's kind of an editorial direction that kind of soured the end of Straczynski's run, and I get that people don't like him for that reason, but I like that. Jason Aaron Thor was really good. There's so much. That's a great question. I think at some point we should do an episode on great storylines and kind of like takes, you know, because it's so hard to think of them in the moment. But it's like
great storylines, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
coming up sometime.
Yeah,
we'll also have an episode that's just tales from the job.
Yep. There you go.
But okay, so talking about storylines, is there to go with that creative teams that are your top? Let's say, what's your top 5 creative teams?
I mean, Claremont Byrne, number one. And that's in no way to dishonor class. So I will tell you, sacrilege for a lot of comic book fans, and I totally understand it. But to answer a question like that, I tend to go for my contemporary, what I was reading at the time, very much that helped. So the answer should be like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. It should be things like that. Unfortunately, it's not. Like, I wish I could say it, but I read all that stuff years after through a different lens, and I very much love and appreciate it for what it was. Like I was talking about, you know, Professor X putting all the pressure on all the X students and all that kind of stuff. I love that, but it's very historical to me more than it is like something I can really read and access.
It has a different meaning, right?
Yeah. I mentioned Frank Miller, and I'll just say like the Wolverine limited series, Miller and Claremont comes to mind as being pretty good. They didn't do a whole lot together, but that's pretty awesome to me. It's a good question. I
mean, you don't have to say top 5. You can stick with top 3 or whatever. But
I'd say the Michelini, Bagley, and then Larson run on Spider-Man's pretty foundational, pretty good stuff for me. That's a good one. I tend to not really follow creative teams as much as individual creators. I think is probably part of the problem. Like, there are certain artists that I just will pick up anything they draw, and there's certain writers I'll pick up anything they write. They rarely have multiple times where they come back together that I can think of. But I'm sure there's some examples.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like, sometimes the stars align and you get this great creative team, and you wish that those guys work together for a longer run.
100%. And I'm the first person to admit that I'm bad at paying attention to who wrote and drew especially a lot of Marvel stuff that I read when I was growing up. There's stuff I go back and I'm like, oh, I can't believe so-and-so worked on that comic book. Because I was just living it. And some people have that kind of catalog memory for that kind of stuff. I have that kind of memory for like characters and events, but not for creators and stuff. I wish I did have more of a mind for that stuff. It's changing as I get older a little bit, as I'm starting to go back and appreciate, like, okay, I really want to read a lot of, this writer, or I want to go back and check out a lot of this artist's artwork. And then I kind of go through like I do this a lot, like Marvel Unlimited. I'll go through all the stuff that they did and kind of like pictures like, oh, I forgot they wrote or drew that or whatever. And I'll go look at that. That's kind of more what I do.
Yeah. Okay. Tropes. That's a great question. what's been the most fun convention experience and why?
That's a good question. I don't have a deep convention experience background. So from that, I'd have to say, I mean, being asked to do a couple panels this last summer was a highlight for me. The last 3 or 4 conventions I've been to have become much more social experiences for me than they ever were before. Spending time with Bigby, spending time with Chris from Comic Tropes, and a lot of other people as well. This last Rose City was insane. It was like every 5 minutes we were running into people we knew. Maybe as time goes on for me more, as I make more connections, more conventions will just be like that. But that's not how conventions were for me for most of my time going to conventions. It was almost like a solo experience, right? Like it was me going and then interacting with creators or celebrities in some cases or whatever, and vendors, and just having that experience. Having that social experience has changed my convention experience completely for the better. So
yeah, totally. It's not about like looking for the books or just, you can have a bad show if you don't find things you're looking for or have a good experience with an artist, but having those social experiences and being able to hang out with people that you care about, make it a blast. One of the best conventions I went to was not this last Rose City, but the one before that. I didn't buy any books. I just hung out with you guys and had a great time.
Yeah.
So
well, and I guess I'll throw one other story on there too that is kind of like maybe more traditional. I've talked about this a little bit before, but the like 2 summer cons ago, Larry Hama was there, and Comics with Bueller, Travis. I met up with him there briefly. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm getting ready to go over to this panel with Larry Hama and Tim Seeley, and like I'm coming to get them." And I was kind of milling around waiting to go talk to them, and I saw they were going to a panel. And he's like, "Oh, you want to walk with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I'm just walking along with Larry Hama and Tim Seeley and Travis, and just talking, and it's that very true story where it's like none of it was about comic books. I wasn't hearing like tidbits about G.I. Joe on that walk. It was about, things at the con, and just like, hearing people that you've read their work for a long time talk about just everyday life stuff. And that was actually more fun than any question about the Joes or whatever that I got to hear answered or got to ask or anything like that. That was just a cool experience too. So
I don't know where we are time-wise. Do we need to take a
yeah,
break?
We should probably take our last one real fast and then come back and finish up probably. So we're going to be back in a couple minutes. Last break. We'll be right back.
Some comic live streams seem like they're just throwing everything at the wall. Hey, you want this unknown comic? Yeah, here, how about this boring one? Found this one in a rain gutter. Give me some money for it. I know this looks like a rotting sandwich, but I swear it's a comic. Pay me! But with Comic Collectibles, we know you don't just want comics, you want the right comics. You want rare, variant, and incentive covers, vintage books in pristine condition at prices you won't find anywhere else, and truly unique, hand-drawn cover sketches by some of the most amazing artists in the business. Join Rex and his rotating cast of co-hosts live from Dynamite Entertainment headquarters for a carefully curated roster of comics that you'll only find here at Comic Collectibles. Every Monday at 6 and Wednesday at 7 Eastern Time. Part of the experience.
Did you know that Arthur, King of the Britons in Monty Python and the Holy Grail was played by a famous Graham? Check out another famous Graham by following our Instagram. Download our app on Google Play and the App Store. It's so simple, even my mommy can use it.
Hey, welcome back. I'm your host, Big B McFly, the comic guy, and I'm joined by...
Is it Bigfoot or is it Bronze Age Nerd? Hey, I'm Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd. Welcome back to the show. Sorry, I wanted to make sure Big B got the chance to lead on that since he's interviewing me.
I know I was supposed to, but hey, you know.
That was the fun for me, as I didn't tell you that you should. But I did want to say real fast, as we're coming back from that last commercial break, those were some advertisements from our from the EXP, which we're also streaming on the EXP channel over there. Highly recommend going and giving them a subscription with your free YouTube dollars. Go do that because you're going to get some great content in exchange for that. At the same time, I'm interviewing, being interviewed by him, but hey, go check out Big Me the McFly, the comic book guy's channel as well. That link is also in the description. I would really appreciate it.
20 away.
There you go. 20 away from 15, right?
From 16.
16. Oh, my bad. I short sold you.
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, no, and yeah, definitely subscribe up to the EXP.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So we got a few minutes left in the show to talk about this boring guy over here. So, and I don't have any community art, by the way, this week queued up and ready to go. I will next week. If you have community artwork, which means if you have artwork you want to show us and you're hearing me say this right now, send it in to either me or Big B, Instagram, or any of the places you can find us. We'd absolutely love to have that community artwork to show off next week and highlight it. And you could win free stuff at the end of the year too.
Hey, we got a new viewer, Dragon Whippy guy. So,
hey, what's up, Dragon? Welcome to the show.
So, Chris, I gotta ask: was it difficult leaving the Sasquatch tribe and assimilating into human civilization?
I'll tell you, buddy, I never left. The real beauty of it is you can just stay in. I'm actually kind of deep cover. We call it the deep state. And I'm just hanging out here, having a good time. Since I am one of the shorter Sasquatch, it's really easy for me to integrate into your society and just have a good time over here and really check it out and enjoy it. It's really chill.
What's the best thing about human society?
Comic books, of course.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
Right.
And honestly, can't lie, Ben and Jerry's. That's the other good thing.
What's that? You do love your ice cream.
You're right.
All right. So I'm gonna dovetail. He shaves his forehead around the cheeks, and we're good to go.
Jay, don't give away my secrets, brother.
All right. So I'm gonna dovetail a question that Chris has here. Chris has a question: ever draw a comic strip or a comic as a kid or an adult? And then I want to dovetail that into, do you have any aspirations as far as comics go? Would you like to be a part of the creator community at some point, or is there some things that you would like to do?
So it's interesting. I never drew a comic or comic strip because I am not a quick artist, and so I never tried. I do art. I try to draw characters and stuff as often as I can. Now I was out of it for a long. What's that?
You do it quite well.
Well, you do it quite well as well, so that means a lot. Thank you. I was out of it for a very long time. I almost refused to do it because I was always frustrated with my own art, and so I didn't really want to do it very often. K-pop junkie actually was like, just draw, or I can't remember exactly how she worded it, but she kind of got me back into drawing. It's like, you know what? I just should just pick it up and start drawing again.
Yeah.
And the problem is I want to draw better. I'm always a perfectionist with anything I do.
Practice.
I know. That's the thing. I understand that. It's one of those things where it's like, I kind of draw something, I hate it. And then I draw something and I hate it a little bit less. And so then I, draw something else. I hate that a little bit less. And then I'll draw something and I hate it more. I'm like, it's kind of that rinse and repeat cycle. But I never was good enough or fast enough to try to lay out an entire story like that. Unlike some people I know who are capable of doing that and doing it well, by the way. So I just try to do a sketch or a splash type thing. That's kind of been, I would say my style is very much in the vein of like trying to do like a trading card of a character. Is like what I think I've loved.
Right.
Those trading cards.
Or a cover image, maybe, you know?
Yeah, kind of like a coverage. But to me, like, I guess to me, a lot of that stuff is kind of modern quality covers, but it really wouldn't have passed for like classic covers in most cases. There's a lot of like single figure covers out there now that didn't used to be how most comic covers were drawn. There usually was more action going on or more background being drawn in.
Story involved rather than just focus on a character, right?
Yeah. And I mean, and of course there's examples where that's not true. Of course, there's classic examples of that. But so I think about those trading cards, and like you often saw the focus on one character. And I guess in my head, I kind of modern think about that. But I also admit that there's a lot of covers out there that kind of that quality. So that's on the art side. Hey, what's up? Thanks for becoming a member, Ash and Nate. Really appreciate it. On the comic side, if I ever did something for art, I think like, you know, I don't think it'll ever happen. Maybe like on a self-published kind of thing, doing like a cover, variant cover. I could see that happening. It's not like a big dream of mine, but it is something that would be fun to do at some point, of course, especially again, if it was something that I was putting out or something somehow. The one thing that I, dovetailing to your second part of your question, the one thing I do have aspirations of doing, and I'm making terrible progress on it, but it is something I'm constantly working on in the back of my head. Not even just the back of my head, but kind of thinking about and plotting out, is writing a story, writing a comic book. To me, the most fun part of it is in the thinking about it phase right now. Right. And that's actually I'm fine with that for now. I'm kind of waiting for some of the ideas I've been working on and toying around with. I'm waiting for one of them to be gripping enough that I'm like, all right, this is the one that I'm actually going to fully script out. I did a lot of that when I was younger. I haven't gone back to doing that, but it is something I do plan on doing at some point, even if it's just, you know, just for me. That's fine. That's totally fine. But yeah, it'd be really fun to do that. I actually really enjoyed, for those that don't know, Comic Tropes did a panel about working in comic books and not being the artist or the writer. He did it with several other folks that are in the comic book industry in various ways at various levels. And that was an interesting topic to me because it did make me think about maybe some other avenues too that you could get involved in comic books with. Like I always thought like being an editor might be kind of interesting, or some different avenues you could approach it in, for sure.
Right. I think it would be cool if you and I did like a convention sketchbook thing or something, you know.
Yeah. We've talked about it before.
Or maybe, or you could script some things. We could do some like little 3-page pitches or something in that, you know.
I do think that'd be interesting. It'd be that's something that, by the way, I think you've done some layouts too that are plot layouts that I think are pretty fun too, that we should probably explore too. So it's not just me, but and your art's awesome. So, and we know some talented folks. So
we do. And there we go. The Big B and Band book. Let's go.
Everybody loves banned books. Oh wait, no.
All right. So let's see. Going down the list of questions. If you could change one thing about comics, what would it be?
Man, it's weird to have that question thrown back at me. I would it's really hard to explain, but I'll do my best. I really want to see every available audience of comic books served better. Okay. So I think there's huge untapped markets with children, with keep in mind your traditional comic book readers are mostly men, mostly, in that 18 to now it's actually, a much older bracket than a lot of other media is considered, like, probably 65 or so plus in some cases. Mm-hmm. Those are most of your comic book readers. I'd like to see everybody else have comic books written for them as well. That could effectively tap into those markets, because I do want more people reading comic books. So that's my biggest thing. I know it sounds like a little like peace and love, man. Like I know it's kind of got an element of that to it, But I honestly do believe that comic books are an underappreciated medium. And I think, things like manga show that a little bit better and how successful manga is. I think that comic books have a place with a lot of readers that are into a lot of other things. And I think that's happened, in a lot of cases where people have gotten into more painted styles of graphic novels have been successful with markets that aren't traditionally into comic books. And I want to see more of that happen. I think that would be one of the best things for comic books. And part of that, and I've said this before, is there's a lot of readers out there that are like, I hate new comic books. I get it. I understand where that energy is coming from. And I've talked about it before, where I think that there's ways to serve those audiences with, pocket universes that are more into their style or what they want. And I think serve those customers as well, because they're your core audience. And tell the new stories you want to tell. There's a place for all of it. I don't think that like at the big two, I don't think it's good for every. I think there's too many X titles. I think there's too many, Spider-Man titles. There's too many things going on with that, where it needs to kind of be simplified and condensed in the core 616 Marvel, in the core, Earth of the DC universe. They've actually kind of been doing a better job of that over there for mostly financial reasons, but I think Marvel needs to follow suit. And then for your other titles, do different versions of Spider-Man, or different universes, or different times in comic books that people want to go back to. Like, it'd be cool if there was Silver Age style Spider-Man comics being put out, or some new Silver Age style hero that's playing around in those universes with those Silver Age characters. I think that'd be fun. Same thing for the Bronze Age, same thing for the Copper Age. But
especially if they hit them in, dovetail them in between stories where it made sense. Like, I always wondered how that happened. Oh, it was this guy that did that.
And X-Men Legends was a short-lived kind of experiment that did that for a while, where they kind of told some interstitial stories, kind of some stuff that was kind of before and after key moments that you probably saw in comic books. And you could do that, and you can also just do completely like almost like with Ultimate, like, here's this new universe, but it's very much in the vein of like what that universe was, and you can kind of restart that. I think that's like printing money right there. But not just that. I think it's also a way to introduce new types of comic books that people can enjoy, that were never into comic books in the first place. I had that experience where I got into things because of G.I. Joe, or I got into things because of the X-Men, the animated series. Batman, the animated series was also like that too, for Batman for me. Although there's a lot of other Batman stuff too to draw on, but that was what, like, the dark grittiness of Batman really kind of like, came home for me. Do more of that stuff. That's what I would do.
I can see that. So where do you think, like, so you say manga is a great way of getting the comics experience to people. How do you think that comics could be better skewed into that vein?
I think that it's more about how a lot of the arguments you hear from people about, these short volumes that have to happen, where titles need to relaunch. It's just confusing for the marketplace. Whereas you have these mangas that run for, these massive, long, uninterrupted runs, and manga fans are totally able to navigate that just fine. Follow things like that part of the model. A lot of my stuff, I think about Marvel because it's the company that I'm most closely connected with when it comes to non-independent comic books.
Right.
Even Image, if you want to kind of throw that in there, like, I'm definitely, Marvel is kind of where I land the most, and I love most of those characters. So I often think about things through that lens, and it's like, I don't think we need, volume 19 of Spider-Man. I don't think we need to have that. I think we can kind of simplify the continuity in the world. Pretty much everyone hates like major event crossovers and having to get 70 books to read one event. It's not even necessarily a problem that they have to do that. If those 70 stories were just told, if you want to do Blood Hunt, just pulling one of the more recent major events, just have Blood Hunt issues 1 through whatever, and don't have it cross over and have to, pick up all these different issues and all these different runs that you don't normally collect. Like, it's always been a cheap gimmick to me. I've never liked that. I'd say pretty much get rid of that, streamline that. I'm sorry for the few people out there that do love that stuff, but I think it's completely avoidable, and we can still have great storytelling without the confusion to the marketplace.
So are you like saying, like, when they do a new volume, at least like keep the legacy numbering on the issue so you know where it runs?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And it's also that's just like one level of it too, because another thing too is I think and this is something that we've gotten caught up in on the history of comic books. We get too caught up on like trying to promote like a landmark issue and make that a huge deal, while at the same time we are doing that kind of 4 to 5 issue trade paperback format. It's like you got to kind of pick one or the other. Like, you can't write 5 issue arcs, because we all know that 5 issue arc of the Marvel thing, it's like issues 2 through 4 are going to be repetition and boring for the most part. Like, the issue 1, you get the setup, and issue 5, you get the conclusion. One of those issues in the middle might be kind of interesting, right? Like, it's just kind of how it's been going over and over again. And I think you can kind of get rid of some of that type of storytelling and make it so that, yeah, you're breaking it up, and sure, it might be going 4 or 5 issue trades, but it doesn't necessarily mean the story has to have an arc that's exclusive to that 4 or 5 issues. And we don't, that way you can still have your like, oh, this big bad's coming and he's going to be this big new villain, and you can kind of promote it that way. That's fine. So what? It doesn't matter. But if you're going to be moving to like that sort of system anyway, and we have been for years, may as well embrace it.
Yeah. No, I get that. Now, like you're saying, like it could be a 5 issue arc, and it could be part 1 of the 20 issue story, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
So 4 trades that make up the whole story arc or whatever. That could be totally a thing. I get that.
And I don't pretend to like sit here and have like the answers all worked out, or this is like the plan that will save comic books or anything like that. I feel like sometimes the comic book industry overthinks it, and the answer is much more simple and just kind of right in front of them. And it's just like, think about when people love Spider-Man the most. Think about when people loved Batman the most. Think about when people loved X-Men the most. It was pretty much when they could follow one title and they could just follow along the story, and the story was great. And we focused on the story. We focused on the characters. We introduced new artists and great. We also gave writers enough time to tell their story, and we didn't have them overstay their welcome in most cases as well. We had maybe stronger editorial control. I feel like it might be kind of part of it. I'm a little disconnected with a lot of the greater Marvel Universe stuff too right now, I'll be honest, because I've just been focusing down on X-Men and the event books as they come up, because I do enjoy reading the events. I just want, like, I'm able to read them on Marvel Unlimited because there's a reading guide. I click on it, I click Blood Hunt, and I'm just reading the next issue, and that's fine. I had to wait 6 months after the books were out to start reading them, but whatever, I'm able to do it. But for people going in and ordering their comic books and on FOC and trying to figure it all out, and all of a sudden 1 month they have $1,000 in comics coming in, it's like, oh my gosh, it's ridiculous.
Right.
So that's my point, I guess.
So what is your favorite thing about comics? Well, I'm going to break this up. I'm going to say, what is your favorite thing about comics in general, comics in the past, and comics currently?
So the greatest thing to me about comic books is that it's an ideal form of escape. And I think that's what I'm always somebody who's loved science fiction. I've loved getting lost in another world. It's like my comfort food. And I absolutely enjoy living in imagination land. Comic books are a amazing way to do that, where big budget TV shows weren't possible. You couldn't have all these characters doing all these things, and you could read that in a book, and then books are great, and I love novels, and that's fine, but you couldn't show much of what's going on. So comic books are kind of that perfect compromise between novels and, big budget movies, where you can tell these fun stories, you can get lost in them. There's a lot of science fiction elements, which always appeals to me. And I think that's really what has always made comics great is this ability for us to check out and the stresses and the realities of the world. And a lot of times some of the beauty is getting mirrors of that world right back in there. Like, I'm a big X-Men fan, and diversity in X-Men is, persecution against mutants and all that kind of stuff. That's obvious allegories for so many things that have happened in the real world. Yeah. And that's great because it's like a lot of great science fiction in that way, because it does have this moral that's very contemporary and very something that we can kind of understand, but we can approach it from a much more imagination-filled, wonderful landscape. So it doesn't have to, it's not like watching the news. It's like hearing about what could be and what is at the same time. So it's great. I love that part of it. And then it was what was best about comic books back then and what was good about comic books now. Is that what your question was exactly?
Yep.
Okay.
Comics from the past and comics currently.
So comics from the past, I would say, I guess kind of going along with what I said earlier, maybe the simplicity is great, but also this is a hard thing to describe, but maybe the work ethic of the creators was different. I mean, you hear things about, like, there's that fantastic article we shared a few weeks ago about Steve Ditko's life and his work ethic and what he, like, the energy he poured into his comic books to make sure that they were the best comic books he could put out. You see that from a lot of the classic creators, the Kirbys of the world, that comes up to, they had, the Frazetta, they had this like intense work ethic, and maybe they weren't paid enough. Not maybe they weren't paid enough, but they weren't paid enough. Maybe that kind of contributed to that hunger, starving artist kind of thing that you hear about from time to time. I'm not sure, but I think it did kind of lend to a better overall finished product. Some of the best comic books we get today are from troubled imaginations, the troubled people's imaginations. And that is weird how that always happens, or seems to always happen. Right. And then a creator gets paid or gets a lot of success or gets a lot of titles or something like that, and then their work isn't as good to people and it kind of falls off. And there is always kind of that thing where that has happened over and over again in time. Now I think a lot of those people are going and doing other things because we still don't pay comic book artists and writers well enough, creatives well enough, and so they go find other things to do. That's just kind of my opinion on that. So I think that was kind of how it was better in the past. How, what's good about comic books now? It probably is the diversity of titles that are available.
Yeah.
Especially in the independent scene. There are also are negative things about that as well. Like there's a lot of titles that are clearly written as like IP pitches for motion pictures or for screen deals, basically. So there's negative things about that too. But there's a lot, if you want comics about dinosaurs with guns, if you want comics about, people who can stop time and do weird kinky stuff, there's comics out there for you, no matter what end of the spectrum you're on of things you want in entertainment. So on that level, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
The variety that's out there. And I also think that the best thing about comic books today is this has kind of always been true to an extent, but pretty much anybody can get their comic book out there. Like if you want to make a comic book and get it out there, you can. And I think that's great too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
I was gonna dovetail onto your thing about the creative work ethic and passion for their work. Have you seen the thing John Byrne's doing with X-Men now, where he's doing?
Well, I was the one that mentioned it.
It's like, what is it, 75 issues already or something of taking off where he left off on X-Men?
So I've heard of it. I haven't had a chance to check it out, but it's one of those things I am curious to check out. Did you go and seek it out?
Website Burn Robotics is his website. Okay. And and I've actually seen there's bootleg hard copies now out there that they're kind of spendy, but they're out there.
No, I'm curious to check that out. But I mean, it's seeing people I know in MySpace, not the website MySpace, but in the creator space that, like YouTube, seeing them come out with comic books and see, there's been some mixed results with that, with people's reaction to it. But I think that's fun too. Not just like, oh, YouTube people making comic books, not just that, but just the fact that like those are fans of comic books making comic books, right. And having some success with it, finding a way to get their comic book out there. And in comics, in a lot of ways, it is a meritocracy. So if your comic book is good, there's a much higher potential that it's going to rise to the surface, than a lot of other constructive mediums. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's just, it's amazing how open the field is for people to make whatever they want. But I was just saying, like, Byrne isn't making anything off of that. It's just his passion for the X-Men and the storyline and the characters, and just drawing it and putting it out there for free for everybody to read. So I mean,
is he possibly though, like through like Patreon supporters or something like that for people that follow him, maybe? Or
I guess, but
okay.
I guess it's free to read.
Not there's anything wrong with that, by the way.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah. But I mean, it's just that he has that passion and love for those characters, and still wants to put stuff out. That's
I mean, kind of a complicated guy looking back on him and his history with comic books, but he is fascinating and no doubt talented. So I'm curious to check it out just to see what it's like. I want to read it.
I hear it's good. And then all he does is pencil it. But there's actually fans going in and inking it and coloring it and everything. So.
Wait, but it's so like Chris was saying, it's his fan comic of how he thinks X-Men should have gone. So is he doing the plot and penciling it?
Plotting.
Okay.
Lettering. It's all on the page per page, like a normal book. But
okay,
people are going in and inking and coloring it after the fact. So.
No, I definitely am curious about that. But yeah, to the greater point, it's like, if you're into doing your comic book, or you have, like, it's also easier to find an artist to work with. Whether that means finding an artist that you can afford to pay, or if there's an artist out there that is like looking to do a comic book and just, like, hey, I need somebody with a good story so I can do my good art and we can get it out there. You see that kind of happening and the potential of it happening out there. And that's to me just a great thing. There are probably also a lot of horror stories. In fact, I know of one I can think of off the top of my head where, the wrong people meet up and do that, and then it ends up being a bad situation. But it's kind of like starting a band and a garage band kind of thing. It's like, we went through like 7 drummers before we found the right one. It's kind of that thing.
Right. Yeah. That the panel we had with Chris, where people were asking, like, what's the best way to get a good artist to work with you? And they're like, pay him.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's like, I think the advice of find somebody who's at the same level you are, that's looking to do it, is probably because then, if you end up publishing, you guys can maybe share the cost, or figure out like, I'll pay for 75% of it, but I'll get 75% of the whatever we make from it too, or however they figure it out. But I think that's maybe a good approach for a lot of people. At least I like to think it's possible.
All right. Well, I would like to thank you for answering my many questions and the questions of our group.
I was happy to have them asked to me. Thanks for taking the time to do that, and thanks for people for suffering through my answers.
Answers were wonderful, and I had a lot of other questions I'd like to ask you, but they'll go for another episode.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a few things that I never got to in your interview too, that I think that might spin out into their own topics, where we can kind of. I know I'm mostly asking it for your take on it, but at the same time, like, we could probably have a fun conversation based around those things. So
I think it's a good forum and a good format. So.
Yeah.
But thanks for watching.
Yeah, I did want to say, speaking of things coming up, we are in spooky season. We're not sure exactly how this is going to work out, but you can catch us every Monday night here at 8 p.m. Pacific. I know it's much later on the East Coast, but hey, that's just how we roll. So we get smaller audiences, but we love everybody that comes and watches these on the rewinds or is watching live. We are going to do some stuff with scary comic books coming up too. So we're going to do like our favorite like Halloween or horror themed covers. That's going to be an episode we have coming up too. And then we had another idea about Halloween. Was it favorite Halloween related stories or favorite horror comics? What was it?
It was Halloween covers, horror stories. I think we were also going to ask like our personal Halloween horror stories, their favorite Halloween stories. So
yeah. So we're going to be talking about some things like that coming up for spooky season. If you have any suggestions, let us know in the comments. If you have anything that you want us to cover.
Your experience.
Yeah.
Paranormal stories like we were sharing with Frank Cho.
Yeah. We can definitely talk about that too. So that'll be fun. And then next Monday, if all goes well, we should probably be recapping the Frankenstein comic swap too. So that might be pretty fun. Hopefully there'll be some cool stuff. Yeah.
Very seasonal with the Frankenstein.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for checking it out, everybody. See, Chris, you're asking the right question here. We'll definitely tackle some things like that. It's a great question.
We need to share out the channel reminders again one more time.
We can do it. Yeah. So we got Big B McFly, the comic book guy. You can go watch his YouTube channel by following the link in the description below. You could also go watch the EXP YouTube channel, or on Twitch, or on X, or Facebook, or a lot of other places they stream, Instagram. However, their YouTube link is in the description down below. If you want to watch my stuff, the link is in the description below for that as well. You're more than welcome to check that out. I really want you guys to go subscribe to Big B and the EXP and start checking out some of their content, though, because I think you're going to be really happy with if you like anything that you heard here, you're going to like what you're going to see on those channels as well. So.
For sure. If you're not subscribed to this guy, you need to.
Yeah, I will say I did do a couple interviews this week that dropped. Brandon Montclair I mentioned earlier. I also had a couple of Transformers creators on talking about the Transformers Kickstarter and the 40th anniversary of Transformers, Simon Furman and Mariano Niciesa. So go check out that as well. Do have some fun videos that are in the pipeline coming up before Heroes for Heroes. So you can check out some stuff I have coming out.
I'm gonna have that big trade video with Son of Prom, so that'll be coming up here soon. And another visit to the Golden Age Honey Hole.
Ooh.
And some other cool stuff coming up. So keep
nice,
an eye
man.
on as well.
Nice. I cannot. Yeah, you guys definitely stay tuned for that big trade video, because you saw the highlights of the stuff he got there. I'm sure there's a lot more fun story to go. I'm excited to see what he has to say about that. So.
Didn't see the highlights of that trade. Watch the beginning of this episode.
Yes, exactly. All right, folks. Well, until next time, I just want to remind you, as always, read comics every day. I believe Big B has a reminder for you as well.
Share your love of comics with everyone you meet. You never know where it may lead you.
Might lead you here, talking to your new friend about comic books on YouTube, right?
That's right.
All right, everyone. Have a great night, and we will see you on the next one. Later.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.